The snap of manicured fingers cut through the first-class cabin like a gunshot. "Sir, you need to move. Now." Heads lifted, breaths caught. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. The injustice was instant, public, and sharp enough to sting everyone in the room. Why was the man in seat 1A being singled out? What crime had he committed by simply sitting still? Nathan Cole didn't react at first. He remained seated, shoulders relaxed, hands resting loosely on his thighs. The soft blue cabin lights reflected off the brushed metal trim of the suite, off the curved window framing the rain, streaking down the glass outside JFK Terminal 4. The aircraft hummed quietly, a low mechanical heartbeat, patient, indifferent. Nathan's eyes stayed forward, calm, almost detached. That calm, more than anything, seemed to enrage her. "You are in the wrong seat," the woman said again, louder now, each word clipped and polished like a blade. "This is first class. The back of the plane is that way." She pointed, not with her whole hand, but with one sharp finger, angled toward economy, as if pointing at something unclean. Her name was Victoria Reynolds, late 40s, perfect posture, hair sprayed into immobility. A cream designer blazer stretched tight across her shoulders, gold jewelry catching the light as she moved. She stood in the aisle like she owned it, like the plane itself had been built to accommodate her expectations. Nathan finally turned his head. Slowly, his eyes met hers, steady and unreadable. He didn't rush, didn't flinch, didn't apologize. "This is my seat," he said quietly, his voice low, even, controlled. American. Educated. Calm in a way that came from habit, not fear. A ripple passed through the cabin, subtle, unspoken. A man in the second row stopped adjusting his cufflinks. An older couple across the aisle exchanged a look, the kind married people share without words when something feels wrong. Near the galley, a young flight attendant froze, her hands gripping a stack of folded linens a little too tightly. Victoria laughed, a short, sharp sound. "That's adorable," she said. "I don't know how you got that boarding pass." "Miles. A mistake. Some kind of upgrade glitch. But you do not belong here." She looked him up and down deliberately. The hoodie, the sneakers, the absence of visible status symbols. People who belong here don't dress like that. Nathan inhaled through his nose, slowly. He felt the familiar heat flicker somewhere deep in his chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something older, colder. He'd felt it before. Boardrooms, elevators, hotel lobbies. Moments when silence was mistaken for weakness. Behind Victoria, Emily Carter stood rigid. 24 years old, new wings on her uniform. Her face had gone pale, a faint sheen of sweat at her temples. She had scanned Nathan's boarding pass herself. Green light. Seat 1A. Everything correct. Her eyes darted between Nathan and Victoria, panic tightening her chest. This wasn't how training videos went. This wasn't a script. "Ma'am?" Emily said softly, almost pleading. "The gentleman is assigned to this seat." "I checked quiet," Victoria snapped without looking back. "I'm speaking to him." She leaned closer to Nathan now, invading his space, the scent of expensive perfume heavy in the air. Listen carefully. I am a Diamond member. My husband is Thomas Reynolds, Chief Financial Officer of Reynolds Freight Solutions. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year with this airline. She smiled, thin and triumphant. You don't. Nathan looked up at her, really looked. He saw certainty, entitlement, the unshakable belief that money was character, that volume was authority. Ma'am, he said, still calm, I paid for this seat. I'm not moving. The cabin went quieter. You could hear the rain on the fuselage now, a distant cart rolling somewhere outside, the soft click of a phone camera activating in row 2. Victoria's smile collapsed. Her jaw tightened. Unbelievable, she muttered. She turned sharply toward the front galley. Is there a supervisor on this flight, or do they just let anyone wander into first class now? Mark Dawson appeared moments later, tall, grey-haired, uniform pressed within an inch of its life. 56. Veteran. The kind of man who'd spent decades smoothing problems away before they ever reached the cockpit. He took in the scene in seconds. The standoff, the watching passengers, Victoria's flushed face, Nathan's stillness. What seems to be the issue? Mark asked, his voice measured but already tired. He stole my seat, Victoria said immediately, and he's being aggressive. Nathan didn't speak. He didn't need to. He watched Mark carefully. He noticed the way Mark's eyes flicked to Victoria's jewelry, to her posture, then to Nathan's clothes. The calculation happened fast, almost invisible, almost instinctive. Sir, Mark said, turning to Nathan. Could we speak for a moment? Nathan held his gaze. I'm happy to speak, he said. Right here. Mark hesitated. The wrong move could delay the flight. Delay meant reports. Reports meant corporate. Corporate meant trouble. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. We're just trying to get everyone comfortable and on our way. I am comfortable, Nathan replied. Victoria scoffed. I'm not. He makes me uncomfortable. That landed. Heavy. Ugly. A man in the third row exhaled sharply through his nose. Emily's fingers trembled. Mark nodded slowly, as if the decision had already been made somewhere behind his eyes. Sir, he said, would you be willing to take another seat? We can offer compensation. Nathan felt it then. The line. The moment where the world asked him to step aside so someone else could remain unchallenged. He straightened slightly. His voice stayed calm, but something hardened beneath it. No. The word echoed more loudly than it should have. Victoria's eyes flashed. Get him out of here, she said. I will not sit next to that. Nathan didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for anything. He just sat there, breathing steady, eyes forward, as the pressure in the cabin climbed and climbed. No one knew it yet, but something irreversible had already begun. Nathan Cole felt the weight of the cabin settle onto his shoulders the moment the word no left his mouth. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was final, and everyone felt it. The air thickened like a storm pressing against glass. Mark Dawson held his smile a second too long. The practiced curve of customer service strained at the edges. He glanced past Nathan toward Victoria Reynolds, then back again, as if hoping the problem might dissolve if he stared at it hard enough. It didn't. Problems like this never did. "Sir," Mark said quietly, leaning closer, lowering his voice in a way meant to feel respectful. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. We're on a tight departure window." Nathan looked up at him, not challengingly, not pleadingly, just directly. "I'm not making it hard," he said. "I'm sitting where I paid to sit." Victoria let out a sharp breath that bordered on a laugh. "Unbelievable," she said. She turned toward the other passengers now, performing for them, palms open. "Can you believe this? The entitlement. They let anyone in here now." A man in the second row shifted uncomfortably. He had the look of someone who had spent his life avoiding conflict by staying quiet and comfortable. His wife leaned towards him, whispering something urgent, her eyes never leaving Nathan. A phone rose slightly in the aisle seat across from them, angled just enough to capture faces, not quite enough to be obvious. Emily Carter stood frozen near the galley, her heartbeat loud in her ears. She could feel it in her throat, the fear. She had followed the rules. She had scanned the pass. She had done everything right, and still the ground was slipping beneath her feet. She watched Mark's shoulders tense, saw the calculation playing out. Schedule versus fairness, contract versus person. She swallowed. "Mark," she said softly, barely more than air. "His boarding pass is valid." Victoria snapped her head around. "Are you questioning me?" Her eyes were cold now, hard. "Do you know who I am?" Emily flinched. She did. Everyone did, in a way. The kind of woman who moved through the world expecting it to bend. The kind of woman who had never been told no without consequences. Mark raised a hand slightly, a calming gesture. "Ma'am, please, we're just trying to resolve this quickly." "Resolve it," Victoria said. "By removing him." She jabbed a finger toward Nathan again, her hand shaking just enough to show how far past calm she'd gone. "I did not pay thousands of dollars to sit next to someone who looks like he wandered in off the street." Nathan felt that one land, not because it was new, but because it was familiar. He kept his face neutral, his jaw set. Inside, the memory rose uninvited. Airports in his 20s, security lines where his bag was always checked twice, lounges where eyes lingered a little too long. He had learned early how to stand still under a gaze like that, how to wait, how to watch people reveal themselves. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "this conversation is over." That did it. Victoria reached down without warning and grabbed the handle of the leather carry-on resting beside Nathan's seat. The motion was fast, impulsive, fueled by something raw. She yanked it up and hurled it into the aisle. The bag hit the carpeted floor with a dull, heavy thud that seemed to echo far louder than it should have. A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Emily covered her mouth. The older woman across the aisle whispered, "Oh my God." Someone swore under their breath. Nathan's eyes dropped to the bag. He didn't move. He didn't rush to pick it up. He simply looked at it, lying there between polished shoes and the narrow path of the aisle. Inside it was his laptop, his work. Years of decisions compressed into code and contracts. He lifted his gaze back to Victoria, slowly. "You shouldn't have done that," he said. She leaned closer, her face inches from his now. "I'll do whatever I want," she hissed. "This is my world. You're just passing through it." Mark felt his stomach drop. This had crossed a line. He knew it. Everyone knew it. But lines had a way of blurring when money was involved. He cleared his throat. "Ma'am, please step back." She ignored him. "I want him off this plane," she said loudly. "I don't feel safe." Nathan almost smiled. Almost. The irony was sharp enough to taste. "You just threw my property," he said, "and you feel unsafe." "I feel threatened," Victoria snapped. "Look at him, just sitting there, staring." Nathan hadn't realized he was staring. He softened his gaze, leaned back slightly, hands open on his thighs. Calm. Control. He could feel the eyes on him now, assessing, judging, waiting for him to slip, to raise his voice, to give them something they could point to. Mark rubbed a hand over his face. He felt old suddenly, tired. He thought of the emails that would follow if this escalated, the calls, the meetings, the way corporate always asked why, never how. He leaned closer to Nathan again, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Sir, between us, I understand this isn't fair. But if you would be willing to move, just this once, we can make it right. Voucher, refund, premium economy." Please, there it was, the ask, the quiet one, the one made away from witnesses, framed as reason. Be the bigger man, take the hit so the machine could keep running. Nathan looked up at him. Really looked this time. He saw the fear behind Mark's eyes. Not of him, but of the system. "You're asking me to move because she's louder," Nathan said softly. "Not because I'm wrong." Mark didn't answer. He didn't have to. Victoria clapped her hands once, sharp and impatient. "What is taking so long?" she demanded. "Call security. Call the captain. Do something." Emily felt tears burn behind her eyes. She stepped back, heart pounding. She had never seen this side of the job. She had never imagined it would feel like this, watching someone be cornered while everyone pretended it was procedure. Nathan leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. The storm inside him settled into something colder, clearer. He glanced toward the window again, at the rain tracing crooked paths down the glass. The plane was still at the gate. Engines quiet, doors closed. Time, for once, was on his side. "Go ahead," he said calmly. "Call whoever you need to call." Victoria blinked, caught off guard by his tone, not defiant, not angry. Not certain. She pressed the call button above her head repeatedly, the chime ringing through the cabin like an alarm. "I want this handled now," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I will not sit next to him." Nathan didn't look at her. He watched Mark instead, saw the moment he realized this was no longer something he could smooth over. The line had been crossed, not just by her, but by the choice now hanging in the air. No one in that cabin understood it yet, but the balance had already shifted. The question was no longer whether Nathan Cole belonged in Seat 1A. It was how much everything else was about to cost. The chime from the call button faded, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than noise. Nathan sat motionless as footsteps approached from the front of the cabin, measured and confident, the sound of authority arriving late to a fire already burning. Graham Whitaker stepped through the curtain with the practiced composure of a man who had spent 3 decades in the air. Early 50s, broad shoulders, a voice that usually calmed drunk celebrities and nervous newlyweds without effort. His eyes swept the cabin in one controlled pass, cataloguing faces, postures, phones, the discarded bag in the aisle. He stopped on Victoria Reynolds. "What seems to be the problem?" Graham asked. Victoria pivoted toward him instantly, relief flashing across her face like she'd finally found the right weapon. "Thank God." "This man," she said, pointing at Nathan again, "is in my seat. He's been aggressive. He refuses to move, and I don't feel safe." Nathan felt the familiar instinct to correct the record rise, then settle. He remained silent, watching. He had learned long ago that the first story told often mattered more than the truth, especially when told loudly. Graham turned to him. "Sir," he said, voice firm but neutral. "May I see your boarding pass?" Nathan reached into his jacket and handed it over without a word. Graham studied it carefully, longer than necessary. He checked the tablet in his other hand, scrolling once, twice. His brow creased. "He's assigned to Seat 1A, Graham said, looking up. "That's correct." Victoria laughed, sharp and dismissive. "That system is wrong. I always sit there. My husband's company has a contract with this airline. You know that. This is ridiculous." Graham felt the familiar tightening in his chest. The contract, the word that changed everything. He glanced briefly at Mark Dawson, who gave the slightest nod. The message was clear. "Be careful." "Ma'am," Graham said slowly, "according to our records—" "I don't care about your records," Victoria snapped. "I care about my comfort, and I am not sitting next to him." The word him hung in the air, loaded, ugly. Emily Carter stood frozen near the galley, her fingers digging into her palms. She watched Graham's face, saw the moment his authority faltered. Not broken, bent. He was doing the math now. Delay costs, complaints, emails, careers. He shifted his weight, turning slightly toward Nathan, lowering his voice. "Sir," Graham said quietly, "would you be willing to step into the galley with me for a moment?" Nathan looked at him, then down at the bag still lying in the aisle. He stood slowly, deliberately, the movement drawing every eye in the cabin. He was taller than Graham by a few inches, not imposing, just present. He stepped into the galley, the curtain closing behind them with a soft, final sound. Graham exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "I'm sorry about this," he said quickly. "She's difficult, but she's marked as a VIP. If this turns into a formal complaint, Corporate will come down hard on us. We're already close to missing our slot. Nathan leaned back against the galley wall, arms relaxed at his sides. She threw my bag, he said. She insulted me. Publicly. I know, Graham said. I know it's not right. But if we delay, the flight misses its window. That affects everyone. Sometimes the best solution is the quiet one. He hesitated, then continued. We can move you to premium economy, full refund, voucher. I'll make sure you're taken care of. There it was again. The quiet solution. The one that asked him to disappear so the problem could feel resolved. Nathan didn't raise his voice. You're asking me to give up my seat, he said, because it's easier than asking her to behave. Graham didn't answer. Sweat beaded at his hairline. Please, he said finally, be the bigger man. The words hit harder than any insult Victoria had thrown. Nathan straightened slightly, his jaw tightening. He thought of every time he'd heard that phrase. Every time it had meant swallow it. Move aside. Let it go. He looked past Graham, through the narrow gap in the curtain. Victoria had already sat down in seat 1A. His seat. She was fluffing the pillow, adjusting the blanket, smiling to herself. Victorious. A glass of pre-departure champagne rested in her hand, bubbles rising lazily. Something inside Nathan went still. No, he said. Graham blinked. Sir, I'm not moving, Nathan repeated. His voice was calm, but it carried weight now. And neither is she. Graham stared at him, confusion flickering across his face. What are you doing? Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a different phone. Not the one he used every day. This one was slim, black, unmarked. He unlocked it with a practiced motion. I'm making a call, he said. Graham felt his stomach drop. Sir, please, let's not escalate this. Nathan didn't look at him. He dialed from memory. The line connected immediately. Operations, a voice said. Dispatch. Connect me to the flight deck, Nathan said, and loop in ground operations at JFK, authorization code Sierra Tango 1 Alpha 0. Graham froze. He recognized the structure of the code before his mind caught up. That wasn't a passenger code. That was internal. Board level. His mouth went dry. The line clicked. Captain Harris speaking, came the reply. Faint but clear. Captain, Nathan said, his voice steady, controlled, carrying authority that didn't need to announce itself. This is Nathan Cole. There was a pause. A long one. The kind that swallowed sound. Mr. Cole, the captain said finally, the shift in his tone immediate and unmistakable. Sir, are you on board? I am, Nathan said, his eyes fixed on the curtain. And we have a situation in the first-class cabin. We're not pushing back yet. Yes, sir, the captain replied without hesitation. I need Port Authority police at the gate, Nathan continued. Immediately. Understood, the captain said. They're on the way. Nathan ended the call and turned back to Graham. The purser looked like the ground had dropped out beneath him. He braced a hand against the counter, breathing shallowly. You did your job, Nathan said quietly. You tried to protect the schedule. I don't blame you. Graham swallowed hard. Who are you? He whispered. Nathan didn't answer. He stepped past him and pulled the curtain aside. Victoria looked up as Nathan re-entered the cabin, a smug smile spreading across her face. Back for your bag? She said lightly. Hurry up. You're blocking the view. Nathan didn't bend down. He stood in the aisle, looking at her. He slowly unzipped his hoodie and then zipped it back up, the motion deliberate. Calm, controlled. Enjoy the champagne, he said, his voice carrying just enough to reach every seat. It's the last one you'll have on this flight. Victoria frowned. What are you talking about? I'm not moving, Nathan said. And you're not staying. She stood abruptly, face flushing. You are nobody, she said. Do you hear me? Nobody. From the galley, Graham stepped forward, his voice trembling but respectful. Mr. Cole, he said, the jet bridge is being reconnected. Police are 2 minutes out. The cabin went dead silent. Victoria turned slowly, disbelief creeping into her expression. Why did you call him that? Graham met her eyes. Because that's his name. Nathan held her gaze as understanding began to dawn, slow and terrible. She saw it then. Not the clothes, not the seat, the way he stood, the way everyone else had gone still. The owner was already in the aisle. She just hadn't known it yet. Victoria Reynolds laughed. Not a soft laugh, not nervous. It burst out of her like a reflex, sharp and brittle, echoing too loudly in the sealed cabin. That's ridiculous, she said, waving a dismissive hand. You people are unbelievable. You expect me to believe this man owns the airline because a flight attendant called him Mr. Cole? She shook her head, lips curling. I've seen better scams in Miami. Nathan didn't respond. He stood in the aisle, unmoving, his presence anchoring the space around him. The cabin felt smaller now, compressed by anticipation. No one spoke. Even the hum of the aircraft seemed to fade, as if the plane itself were holding its breath. Emily Carter's knees trembled. She pressed herself closer to the galley wall, eyes locked on Nathan, then on Victoria. She had never witnessed a moment like this. Something irreversible was unfolding, and she knew instinctively that there would be no pretending afterward. No version of this would be smoothed over. Mark Dawson cleared his throat, but no sound came out. He swallowed, his pulse pounding in his ears. He thought of the years he had spent telling himself he was neutral, that he followed procedure, that he didn't pick sides. He felt the lie of it now, heavy and uncomfortable. Victoria stepped closer to Nathan again, her confidence forced, her voice louder than necessary. You think calling security scares me? She said. I know the Vice President of Customer Relations personally. One call and every person on this crew is reassigned to regional routes by tomorrow. Nathan finally spoke. You should sit down, he said quietly. She scoffed. Make me. The sound of boots echoed from the jet bridge before either of them could move. Heavy, deliberate, unmistakable. The cabin door swung open with a hiss, and 3 Port Authority officers stepped inside, filling the narrow entryway with dark uniforms and controlled force. The lead officer was Sergeant Daniel Morales, late 40s, calm eyes, the kind of man who had learned long ago how to read a room before it read him. His gaze swept the cabin in one smooth motion, taking in the phones half hidden behind seatbacks, the scattered bag in the aisle, the rigid posture of the crew. "We got a call from the captain," Morales said, his voice firm, carrying easily. "Interference with flight operations and an assault complaint." "Who's involved?" Victoria reacted instantly. She stepped forward, voice rising, trembling with performative outrage. "Officer, thank God you're here. This man has been harassing me, impersonating an executive, and refusing to leave my seat. I feel threatened." Morales turned to Nathan. Nathan met his eyes calmly. He didn't raise his hands, didn't step back. He simply nodded once. "She threw my bag," Nathan said. "She used slurs. She delayed the flight." Victoria spun on him. "That is a lie. He's dangerous. Look at him." Her voice cracked. "He's reaching for things. I don't feel safe." Morales held up a hand. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "I need you to step back." Nathan reached slowly into his pocket. Victoria screamed. "He's got a weapon!" Morales's hand moved to his belt, but he didn't draw. He watched Nathan carefully. Nathan withdrew a slim leather wallet and opened it, holding it up at chest level. Inside, a gold credential caught the cabin light. Alongside it, a government-issued identification. Morales leaned in, squinting. Recognition flickered across his face. He straightened immediately, posture shifting. "Mr. Cole," he said, nodding once. The name rippled through the cabin like a shock wave. Victoria froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked from Morales to Nathan, her world tilting. "What?" she whispered. Graham Whitaker felt his knees weaken. He reached for the counter to steady himself. He finally understood why the captain's voice had changed, why the call had been answered immediately. Morales turned to Victoria. His tone cooled. "Ma'am, I need you to listen carefully. This passenger has identified himself. We're going to ask you to gather your belongings and step off the aircraft." "I'm not going anywhere," Victoria snapped, desperation bleeding through the bluster now. "I paid for this seat. I have rights." Morales pulled a pair of restraints from his belt. "You do," he said. "You also have the right to remain silent, and I strongly recommend you start using it." Victoria lunged for her phone. "I'm calling my husband." Nathan spoke again, his voice low but carrying. "Put it on speaker." She hesitated. Her fingers trembled as she dialed. The phone rang once, twice. A man answered, his voice clipped and irritated. "Victoria, I'm in a meeting. They're arresting me," she cried. "Some man is lying about owning the airline." There was a pause. "What's his name?" her husband asked slowly. She swallowed. "Nathan. Nathan Cole." Silence. Long, heavy, crushing. The man's voice returned, stripped of anger, edged with fear. "Get off the phone," he hissed. "Do not say another word." Nathan stepped forward and took the phone gently from her hand. "Thomas Reynolds," he said calmly. "We'll be reviewing your company's contract first thing in the morning." "I'm sorry," Thomas said immediately. Please. This is a misunderstanding. Nathan handed the phone back. It's not. Morales nodded to his officers. They moved in, efficient and unyielding. Victoria screamed as the restraints clicked closed around her wrists, the sound final, irrevocable. She kicked, thrashed, her heels scraping against the carpet as she was lifted and carried toward the door. As she passed Nathan, her voice broke. "I didn't know," she sobbed. "I'm sorry." Nathan didn't look at her. He turned instead to Emily, who stood frozen near the galley, tears streaming silently down her face. "Are you all right?" he asked her gently. She nodded, barely able to breathe. "Yes, sir." "Take the rest of the week off," he said. "Paid." The officers escorted Victoria out. The door closed. The cabin erupted into quiet applause, restrained but heartfelt. Phones lowered. People exhaled. Nathan bent down and picked up his bag, brushing it off carefully. He placed it on the now empty seat beside him. "Captain," he said into the intercom, his voice steady. "We're clear to depart." "Yes, sir," came the reply. Nathan sat down, fastening his seatbelt as the engines began to stir. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Indifferent. Inside, something fundamental had shifted. Justice had taken a breath, and the sky waited. The applause faded into an uneasy quiet as the cabin slowly returned to motion. Seatbelts clicked. Trays were secured. The engines deepened their pitch, a low growl rolling through the fuselage as the aircraft eased back from the gate. Nathan Cole sat still, eyes forward, feeling none of the satisfaction people expected him to feel in moments like this. Victory had never tasted sweet to him. It tasted necessary. That was all. Across the aisle, the older woman who had gasped earlier wiped at her eyes with a tissue, her hands shaking. Her husband leaned close, whispering something meant only for her. But his gaze kept drifting back to Nathan, full of a quiet respect that hadn't been there before. In the second row, the man who had been adjusting his cufflinks stared down at his phone, thumb hovering, then typing. Not gossip, not outrage. A message that began with, "You won't believe what I just witnessed." Emily Carter sank onto a jump seat near the galley, her legs barely holding her. The adrenaline was draining now, leaving behind a hollow ache. She replayed the moment again and again in her mind. The way the bag hit the floor. The way Nathan never raised his voice. The way authority had shifted without shouting. She realized she had just watched something she would carry with her for the rest of her career. A line drawn. A boundary enforced. Mark Dawson stood rigid near the front, hands clasped behind his back, staring at nothing. His reflection stared back at him from the glossy surface of a closed cabinet. He didn't like what he saw. He thought of every time he had told himself he was just keeping things running. That fairness was a luxury. That the system couldn't afford principles when money was involved. The system had spoken today, loudly, and it hadn't chosen him. The aircraft lurched gently as it began to taxi. Outside, the rain smeared the lights of the tarmac into long, trembling streaks of gold and white. Nathan watched them pass, one by one, like time moving forward, whether anyone was ready or not. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again, and again. By the time the plane lifted into the night, climbing steadily through the clouds, the story was already loose in the world. A man in the second row leaned forward slightly. "Sir," he said, voice hesitant, respectful. "I recorded some of that, just in case." Nathan turned his head, met his eyes. "Thank you," he said. "Nothing more." The man nodded, relieved, as if he'd been holding something fragile and had just set it down safely. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Nathan finally reached into his pocket and checked his phone. Missed calls, messages, alerts stacking on top of each other. His general counsel, his head of communications, his security director. A text from his assistant that simply read, "It's everywhere." He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the hum of the engines steady his breathing. He had known this would happen the moment he made the call. Power, once revealed, never stayed contained. It rippled, it provoked, it invited retaliation. 2 rows back, a phone screen glowed brightly in the darkened cabin. A video played silently, looping. Victoria's voice, sharp and cruel. The bag hitting the floor, the officers boarding, the cuffs. A caption underneath it, already shared thousands of times. "First-class nightmare." The comments were a flood, some furious, some triumphant, some ugly, some grateful. Nathan didn't watch it. He didn't need to. He had lived it. Emily stood and moved quietly down the aisle, offering water, checking belts, her hands steadier now. When she reached Nathan's seat, she paused. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, "can I get you anything?" He looked up at her. Really looked. The fear was still there. But beneath it was something else now. Resolve. "I'm fine," he said. Then after a beat, "You did the right thing." Her eyes filled again, but this time she smiled. Small, grateful. She moved on. Hours later, as the cabin slept, Nathan sat awake, watching the faint outline of the wing cut through the dark. His mind was already moving ahead, mapping the fallout. He knew Thomas Reynolds would be calling lawyers by morning. He knew statements would be crafted, narratives shaped, blame redirected. He had seen it all before. Men like Reynolds never believed they had lost until the ground gave way beneath them. His phone buzzed once more. A message from his head of communications. "We're seeing a split reaction. Video from another angle shows everything. We're holding statement until you land." Nathan typed back a single sentence. "Release the full footage." No edits. He set the phone down and leaned back, letting the cabin lights dim further. Around him, the plane breathed, alive and moving, carrying stories and people and consequences across an ocean. He thought of Victoria Reynolds being processed somewhere on the ground, of the shock that would still be ringing in her ears, of the certainty that had cracked, finally, like glass. He didn't feel satisfaction. He felt gravity. By the time the plane began its descent toward London, the narrative had sharpened. Headlines formed in real time. Billionaire CEO removed racist passenger mid-flight. Airline owner reveals identity after public humiliation. Justice at 30,000 feet. Nathan watched the city lights appear below, scattered and cold, and knew this was only the opening act. The battle in the air had ended. The one on the ground was just beginning. London greeted them with grey skies and a thin, persistent drizzle that slicked the runway like oil on glass. Nathan Cole watched the city come into focus through the window as the plane touched down, the tires screaming briefly before settling into a steady roll. The cabin exhaled. Phones came alive. Screens glowed. Whatever had happened in the air was now fully awake on the ground. He didn't rush. He never rushed after moments like this. Rushing belonged to people who felt chased by outcomes. Nathan had learned to move at the speed of inevitability. He stood when the seatbelt sign went dark, retrieved his bag, and waited as passengers filed past him, glances lingering longer than courtesy required. Some nodded. Some whispered. One man stopped, hesitated, then said quietly, "Thank you." Nathan inclined his head and said nothing. At the jet bridge, security was already in motion. Discreet, professional. No sirens, no spectacle. His phone vibrated again in his hand. He didn't answer. He followed the corridor toward the terminal, the smell of rain and coffee mixing in the air, the familiar chaos of Heath Row, humming like a living thing. Cameras flashed somewhere beyond the glass. He felt them without seeing them. A black sedan waited curbside, engine running, windows tinted. His driver, Alan, stood by the rear door, face set. "Evening, sir," he said. "Shard in 40 minutes. Traffic's heavy." Nathan nodded. "We'll make it." Inside the car, the city slid by in wet reflections. Red buses, umbrellas like dark flowers blooming and collapsing. His phone rang again. This time he answered. "Talk to me," he said. Elena Brooks's face filled the screen, pale under office lights. Early 40s. Sharp eyes dulled by a long day that had just begun. "It's moving fast," she said. "Faster than we expected. The video from row 2 is everywhere. Clear audio. No edits. That helps. But Reynolds went nuclear." Nathan leaned back, listening. The car hummed. Wipers beat time. How nuclear. "He planted a story with the Sentinel," Elena said. "Front page online. They're framing you as a bully. Power tripping. CEO intimidates woman mid-flight. They cropped out the officers, cropped out the bag, cropped out everything that doesn't fit." Nathan closed his eyes briefly. Not anger. Calculation. And the bots. "Thousands," Elena said. "They're flooding comments. Boycott calls. Stock dipped 4% in pre-market. About 600 million in market cap." Nathan opened his eyes, watching the Thames appear between buildings, dark and patient. "Release everything." "We did," Elena said. "Unedited. Multiple angles. Witness statements. The tide's turning. But he's not done." "He won't be," Nathan said. "What about legal?" "Our counsel is drafting," she replied. "Assault. Interference with flight operations. Defamation. The contract review with Reynolds Freight is already underway." Nathan nodded once. "Get Marcus." Elena hesitated. You only call Marcus when you want scorched earth. Nathan's voice didn't change. He wants a war. The call ended. The car pulled into the underground garage at the Shard. Elevators whispered upward. Glass walls revealed a city layered in steel and rain. In the conference room, screens were already alive with feeds, charts, headlines updating in real time. His team stood as he entered. He waved them down. "Sit," he said. "We work." They worked. Statements refined to steel. Timelines aligned. Facts stacked so tightly there was no room to breathe between them. Nathan moved through it all with the same calm he'd had in Seat 1A. This was his terrain. Power without noise. Pressure without panic. His phone buzzed again. An unknown number. He didn't answer. It buzzed again. Then a message appeared. "You took my wife. You took my contract. I'm going to take your airline." Nathan stared at the words for a moment, then handed the phone to Elena. "Add this to the file." She read it and looked up, eyes sharp. Threat. "Desperation," Nathan said. "He's telling us who he is." Hours later, alone in his office, Nathan loosened his tie and stood at the window. The Shard cut the night like a blade. Below, London moved on, indifferent. He thought of Thomas Reynolds, sitting somewhere expensive and angry, mistaking leverage for strength. Men like Reynolds didn't understand restraint. They mistook it for weakness. They always did. His secure line rang. He answered without looking. "Sir," said a voice he trusted. "Graves, head of security, former intelligence." We intercepted chatter. Reynolds wired $50,000 to a baggage handler at JFK Terminal 4. Nathan didn't react. Purpose. "Planting narcotics," Graves said. "Your return flight. Enough to put you away." Nathan exhaled slowly. The city lights blurred slightly as rain traced the glass. "Let it happen." A pause. "Sir." "Let him try," Nathan said. "But I want eyes on everything." Port Authority. Federal. Chain of custody airtight. "Understood," Graves said. "We'll set the trap." Nathan ended the call and poured himself a glass of water. He drank it slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle. Reynolds had crossed the line. Not the moral one. The stupid one. There was no coming back from that. He left London that night. Private, quiet, no hoodies this time, a navy suit, war mode. The jet cut through the dark Atlantic while he reviewed files, the rhythm of the engines steadying his thoughts. Somewhere below, the ocean held its secrets. Somewhere ahead, a man was writing his own ending without knowing it. As dawn broke over New York, grey and unforgiving, Nathan's phone chimed once more. Graves again. They took the bait. Handler made the drop. He's in custody. He's talking. Nathan closed his eyes, a faint tension finally releasing from his shoulders. "Good. Where do you want Reynolds arrested?" Graves asked. Nathan thought of stages, of lights, of rooms full of people who believed stories until truth walked in and Tulku took the microphone. "Where it hurts," he said. "Where he can't hide. He's speaking this morning." Graves smiled on the other end of the line. Nathan could hear it. We'll be ready. The jet descended toward JFK, the city rising to meet it, sharp and awake. Nathan fastened his seatbelt and looked out at the familiar sprawl. The air battle was over. The ground war was about to be very public. The Global Logistics Summit buzzed with the low, self-satisfied energy of expensive suits and rehearsed smiles. The Jacob Javits Center gleamed under white lights, glass and steel reflecting 1,000 conversations about supply chains, margins, and power. This was Thomas Reynolds's world. He stood backstage, adjusting his tie, breathing in the comfort of control. He hadn't slept, but adrenaline carried him now. He believed, truly believed, that he had survived the worst of it. On his phone, silence. No word from the fixer, which meant success. That was how it always worked. Problems disappeared when you paid the right people. He told himself Nathan Cole was waking up in a holding room somewhere, explaining why a kilo of cocaine had been found in his luggage. He imagined headlines rewriting themselves, imagined the balance restoring itself. The universe, he thought, favored men like him. 5 minutes, an assistant said, peeking in. Reynolds nodded, pasting on his public face. Calm, confident, untouchable. Out in the hall, executives filled their seats. Polite applause rippled as Reynolds stepped onto the stage, the banner behind him reading, Executive of the Year in bold, celebratory letters. Cameras flashed. He smiled broadly, gripping the podium like it was an old friend. Innovation, Reynolds began, his voice amplified, steady. That's the lifeblood of our industry. The doors at the back of the auditorium burst open. The sound cut through the room like a fracture. Heads turned. Conversations died. Reynolds squinted against the lights, irritation flickering. Late arrivals, he thought. Then he saw the jackets, the yellow letters, FBI. And walking between them, unhurried, perfectly composed, was Nathan Cole. The room froze. Reynolds's smile collapsed. The blood drained from his face so fast it felt like the floor tilted. His hands tightened on the podium, knuckles whitening. No, this wasn't possible. This wasn't the story he'd paid for. Thomas Reynolds, a voice boomed from the back, clear without a microphone. Step away from the podium. The audience murmured, a collective intake of breath. Phones rose. Someone whispered Nathan Cole's name like a prayer or a curse. Reynolds stammered into the mic. What is the meaning of this? I'm in the middle of... Nathan climbed the steps calmly, moving into the light. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. He placed a hand lightly on the podium, easing Reynolds aside as if rearranging furniture. Ladies and gentlemen, Nathan said, leaning into the microphone, his voice steady, controlled, carrying to every corner of the hall. I apologize for the interruption. A gasp swept through the room. My name is Nathan Cole. The reaction was immediate, audible. This wasn't a rumor anymore. This was the man from the video, the airline owner, the CEO who'd sat quietly while the world misjudged him. Reynolds lunged forward. You set me up, he hissed, panic breaking through the polish. You framed me. 2 agents moved instantly, gripping his arms, pulling him back. The podium microphone screeched as it toppled. Cameras flashed wildly. Nathan didn't flinch. He waited until the room settled into a stunned, breathless silence. "Mr. Reynolds spoke moments ago about taking risks," he said. "But there's a difference between business risk and criminal conspiracy. Bribing federal employees, attempting to plant narcotics on a competitor. Extortion." Reynolds struggled, his voice rising. "This is a witch hunt." "Desperation," Nathan replied calmly. "And it always looks like this." The agents forced Reynolds to his knees, cuffing him as gasps rippled through the audience. A man in the front row covered his mouth. Another shook his head slowly, stunned. As Reynolds was hauled away, he screamed, "Victoria! Call my wife!" Nathan leaned back into the microphone, his gaze sweeping the room. "She can't help you," he said evenly. "She's being arraigned." The agents dragged Reynolds down the aisle, his protests echoing, dignity stripped in real time. The banner behind the stage fluttered slightly in the disturbed air, mocking now. Nathan straightened his jacket. "Sovereign Airways stands for integrity," he said. "We don't bully, we don't lie, and we don't confuse money with moral authority." He stepped back from the mic. "Thank you." The room erupted. Not polite applause, thunderous, cathartic. Executives stood, some clapping, some staring, all witnesses now. Hours later, in a holding cell that smelled of bleach and cold metal, Victoria Reynolds sat barefoot on a bench, mascara streaked, her cream blazer wrinkled beyond repair. The television mounted high on the wall flickered to life. Breaking news filled the screen. Thomas Reynolds arrested at Global Logistics Summit. Charged with conspiracy, attempted trafficking, corporate extortion. Victoria slid down the wall, her legs folding beneath her. The world she'd built on assumptions and entitlement crumbled quietly around her. No shouting now. No power. Just the sound of a distant door locking. Back at JFK weeks later, the rain fell just as it had that night. Nathan Cole walked through the terminal in a tailored suit, security discreet at his sides. Near the check-in counter, he paused. Emily Carter stood there, different now, confident, a gold pin on her lapel. Senior purser. She met his eyes and smiled. "Good evening, Mr. Cole," she said. "Good evening," he replied. He now cool. "How's the team?" "On time," she said, "and doing well." Nathan nodded and continued toward the gate. At a newsstand, a magazine cover caught his eye. From first class to no class. Victoria's face stared back, older, diminished. He didn't smile. He felt balance. On the plane, he walked past seat 1A. The captain looked up. "Your seat, sir." Nathan glanced at it, then shook his head. "I'll take 1B." He sat down, buckled in, and watched the city lights fall away. He owned the airline. He owned the But what mattered most, he knew now more than ever, was owning the moment when silence met injustice and refused to move. The fallout didn't fade. It multiplied. By morning, the video had fractured into 1,000 clips, angles spliced and respliced by strangers who thought they understood what they were seeing. Some slowed it down, searching for the moment Nathan's expression changed. Others froze on Victoria's face mid-sneer, turning cruelty into a still frame. Commentators spoke with confidence they hadn't earned. The internet, relentless and hungry, argued about justice as if it were a sport. Nathan watched none of it. He sat in his office overlooking the runway at JFK, a place he rarely used but trusted when clarity mattered. Planes rose and fell outside like punctuation marks in a sentence the city had been writing for decades. He listened instead. To reports, to voices trained to cut through noise, to the small human details that never made headlines. "Elena," he said, not looking away from the glass. "Timeline." Elena Brooks stood at the table, tablet glowing. "Reynolds Freight terminated Thomas this morning. Immediate. They're cooperating with federal investigators. They released a statement disavowing everything." She paused. "They also asked if there's any chance of salvaging a relationship." Nathan exhaled through his nose. "There isn't." She nodded, typing. "Victoria's arraignment is set for early next week. Assault and disorderly conduct. The interference charge sticks." "And the crew," Nathan said. Elena looked up. Graham Whitaker put in his notice. Nathan turned. "Voluntary?" "He said he couldn't reconcile the call he made," she replied. "He asked that his letter be placed in his file, not buried." Nathan considered that. "Honor it." Elena's eyes softened. "Emily Carter has been promoted. Senior purser track. She asked me to tell you she didn't expect it." "Good," Nathan said. "She shouldn't have to." Outside, a wide body lifted into the low clouds, engines straining, then smoothing out as the climb stabilized. Nathan watched until it disappeared. He felt the familiar pull to move on, to close the file, to let the system continue. But something tugged at him, a thread he hadn't expected. "Get me the unedited cabin audio," he said. Elena hesitated. "The public version?" "No," Nathan said. "The raw." She nodded and sent it through. Nathan slipped on headphones and listened. He didn't skip. He didn't fast forward. He listened to the cadence of voices, the pauses, the small sounds that never made it into clips, the fear in Emily's breath, the strain in Graham's voice, the way Mark Dawson tried to keep the peace by breaking it. He listened to himself too, not for pride, but for accuracy. Had he been clear? Had he been fair? Had he crossed a line he wouldn't defend tomorrow? When it ended, he sat in silence for a long time. The door opened softly. Graves stepped in, posture relaxed, eyes alert. "Media wants a sit down," he said. "Major networks, long form." Nathan removed the headphones. Number Graves raised an eyebrow. "They won't stop." "I know," Nathan said. "We'll give them documents." "Not me." "Some will say you're hiding." Nathan stood. "Let them." He walked the length of the office, stopped at the wall where old photographs hung, black and white shots of early routes, crews standing proud in uniforms that had changed with decades but not with purpose. He thought of his father again, of the lessons learned quietly, without ceremony, Don't raise your voice unless you intend to finish the sentence. Don't confuse attention with respect, and never ask permission to exist where you belong. The next wave came from a place he hadn't anticipated. Letters, real ones, handwritten, slid into his inbox and delivered to reception. A retired teacher from Ohio, a veteran from Arizona, a flight attendant who'd left the industry years ago. They wrote about moments that had never gone viral. Seats surrendered, voices swallowed, choices framed as compromises. They thanked him not for the arrest, not for the reveal, but for the refusal. Nathan read every one. At the board meeting that followed, the room was full and quiet. Screens showed charts trending back toward equilibrium. Numbers reassured. Nathan let them sit. When he spoke, it was not about profit. "We train for procedures," he said. "We don't train for pressure. That changes today." A murmur rippled. He raised a hand. "I want de-escalation training built around power dynamics, not scripts, judgment. I want crew empowered to stop abuse, not manage it. And I want a policy that makes it clear. Status does not outrank safety or dignity." One director shifted. That could slow operations. Nathan met his gaze. So does injustice. No one argued. Outside the meeting room, Emily Carter waited. She stood straighter than she had weeks ago, the gold pin catching the light. "Sir," she said, "I wanted to say thank you." Nathan shook his head. "For doing your job?" "For standing there," she said, "when it mattered." He considered her words. "Standing isn't enough," he said. "You also have to stay." She nodded, understanding more than she said. Days passed. The noise softened, but didn't vanish. It never did. Nathan flew, not privately, not always first class. He took notes, watched hands, listened for the words people used when they thought no one important was listening. The work was slow, unphotogenic, necessary. On a flight out of Seattle, a man raised his voice at a gate agent, not loud, sharp. The agent stiffened. Nathan waited. He didn't intervene. Not yet. He watched the way another passenger leaned in, calm, diffused it with humor and respect. The situation dissolved. Nathan smiled to himself. Culture didn't change by decree. It changed by permission. The last message came late one night, an email forwarded by Elena. Subject line, request for comment. Attached was a draft apology from Victoria Reynolds, written by counsel, scrubbed of responsibility, polished until it meant nothing. Nathan read it once and deleted it. In the quiet that followed, he stood by his window again, watching planes stitch the sky with light. He understood now that the story had grown beyond him. It had become a mirror people were holding up to themselves, asking what they would do if silence were the price of comfort. He didn't need to answer that question for them. He had already answered it for himself. The sentencing didn't draw cameras the way the arrest had. There was no stage, no banner, no dramatic entrance. Just a federal courtroom in lower Manhattan, fluorescent lights buzzing softly, the sound of benches creaking as people shifted their weight. Nathan Cole sat in the back row, unnoticed, as Thomas Reynolds stood before the judge, looking smaller than the man the world had seen behind podiums. Reynolds's suit was still expensive, but it no longer fit the moment. His shoulders slumped. His hands shook when he clasped them together. The confidence that once filled rooms had leaked out somewhere between the handcuffs and the holding cell. When the charges were read, they sounded clinical. Conspiracy, attempted trafficking, corporate extortion, words that stripped away reputation and left only record. The judge spoke calmly, methodically. Sentences measured in years, not headlines. Reynolds stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, absorbing the sound of his own undoing. When it was over, he was led away without looking back. Nathan stood and left before anyone could recognize him. Victoria Reynolds' reckoning was quieter still. No courtroom drama, no speeches, just paperwork and time. Her assets were frozen pending civil judgments. The social invitations stopped arriving. Friends who had once laughed too loudly at her jokes stopped returning calls. She moved out of the penthouse and into a small rental near Queens, a place where no one cared who she used to be. On her first day working the greeting desk at a big box store, she practiced smiling in the bathroom mirror. The smile didn't reach her eyes. Customers walked past without seeing her. Some were polite. Some were impatient. One woman snapped her fingers when Victoria didn't answer fast enough. Victoria swallowed and said, "How can I help you?" The words tasted unfamiliar. Across the city, Sovereign Airways released its annual report. Buried deep between fuel costs and route expansions was a new section. Crew authority and passenger conduct. The language was plain, unambiguous. Abuse would not be negotiated. Status would not shield behavior. The policy spread quietly through the industry, debated in boardrooms, copied in training manuals, resisted by some, welcomed by others. Nathan didn't announce it. He didn't need to. On a flight from Denver to Boston months later, he sat in an aisle seat halfway back. No hoodie, no entourage, just another passenger with a book he wasn't really reading. 2 rows ahead, a man raised his voice at a flight attendant about a delayed drink. The attendant listened, steady, and said, "Sir, I'm happy to help when you speak to me respectfully." The man scoffed, rolled his eyes, started to say more. Another passenger leaned over. "Hey," she said gently. "It's not her fault." The man looked around, suddenly aware of eyes on him. He muttered something and sat back. Nathan felt something loosen in his chest. Not relief. Recognition. At headquarters, Emily Carter led a training session for new hires. She stood at the front of the room, confident now, telling a story without names. She spoke about the difference between service and submission, about how dignity wasn't an upgrade, it was a baseline. The room listened. Phones stayed down. Afterward, she found an email waiting for her. A simple note from Nathan. "You handled that well. Keep going." She printed it and tucked it into a notebook she carried everywhere. Mark Dawson wrote from a small town upstate, where he had taken a job teaching aviation management at a community college. His letter was handwritten, careful. He thanked Nathan for not destroying him when it would have been easy. He wrote about telling students that leadership wasn't about preventing conflict, but about choosing which conflicts were worth facing. Nathan wrote back, brief, encouraging. He meant every word. The world moved on, as it always did. New scandals replaced old ones. New villains were crowned. New heroes argued over. But the clip from seat 1A never quite disappeared. It resurfaced whenever someone crossed a line in public and expected silence to follow. It became shorthand, a reminder, a warning. Nathan understood now that power wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It waited. It watched. And when it moved, it did so with purpose. One evening, he stood alone on a tarmac in Los Angeles, the sun bleeding into the horizon, planes lining up like patient giants. He thought back to that first snap of fingers, the moment that had started it all. How small it had seemed, how ordinary. Injustice rarely arrived with drama. It arrived with entitlement, with assumptions, with the certainty that no one would push back. He checked his watch and headed toward the terminal. Another flight, another seat, another chance to observe the quiet choices people made when they thought no one important was watching. As he boarded, the captain greeted him. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Cole." Nathan nodded and moved on. He took his seat, buckled in, and opened his book at last. Outside, the engine spooled up, carrying hundreds of lives forward together. Somewhere in the cabin, a conversation turned respectful instead of sharp. Somewhere else, a line held. Nathan didn't smile. He didn't need to. He had learned that the most lasting victories didn't feel triumphant. They felt balanced, like gravity restored. The rain at JFK that night looked exactly the same as it always had. Heavy, relentless, beating against glass and concrete with no concern for who had won or lost. Nathan Cole stood beneath the terminal lights, coat buttoned, hands relaxed at his sides, watching travelers hurry past him, chasing connections, chasing comfort, chasing the illusion that the world bent for anyone in particular. He moved through the airport without urgency. No cameras, no security detail in sight. Just a man walking with the quiet certainty of someone who had already survived the worst of being misunderstood. The incident that had once threatened to define him had settled into something else now. Not legend, not scandal, a reference point, a line in the sand people remembered when they were tempted to cross one of their own. At the gate, a new crew prepared the aircraft. Fresh faces, polished uniforms, voices calm but alert. Emily Carter stood near the podium, reviewing final details with her team. She carried herself differently now, not hardened. Poundard. Authority sat on her shoulders without weighing her down. When she noticed Nathan waiting nearby, she nodded respectfully. He returned it. No ceremony, no spotlight, just recognition. Boarding began. Nathan joined the line when his group was called. No shortcuts, no quiet wave to bypass the process. He handed over his boarding pass like everyone else. The agent scanned it and smiled, unaware of the story that had once unfolded behind that same gesture. Inside the cabin, the scent of clean upholstery and recycled air wrapped around him. He walked past first class without stopping. The seat by the window was empty, perfectly lit, waiting for someone who wanted to be seen. Nathan kept going. He turned into the aisle seat he had chosen deliberately. 1B. He stowed his bag, sat down, buckled in. The man beside him nodded politely and returned to his newspaper. No assumptions, no entitlement. Just two strangers sharing space without friction. Nathan leaned back and closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the sounds of the plane preparing itself for flight. The low whine of systems, the muted footsteps of crew, the quiet conversations fading into background noise. He thought of Victoria Reynolds, standing behind a counter now, greeting people who barely noticed her. He didn't feel satisfaction. He felt symmetry. The universe hadn't punished her. It had corrected her. Slowly. Permanently. He thought of Thomas Reynolds, sitting in a cell somewhere upstate, days measured by count instead of influence. He wondered if the man understood yet that power without restraint always collapsed inward. That no amount of money could insulate someone from the consequences of believing they were untouchable. The engines roared to life. The plane began to move. As they taxied, Nathan glanced out the window at the rows of lights stretching into darkness. He remembered his father's voice, low and steady, telling him that dignity was not something you demanded. It was something you demonstrated when it cost you something, especially when it cost you something. The plane lifted. Gravity pressed him back into his seat. New York fell away beneath a blanket of cloud and night. Somewhere below, the world kept arguing about who deserved what. Somewhere above, none of that mattered. Nathan opened his book, but didn't read. His mind drifted instead to all the quiet moments that would never make headlines. A flight attendant deciding whether to speak up. A passenger choosing to intervene kindly instead of filming cruelty. A manager deciding not to trade integrity for convenience. These were the moments that shaped culture far more than viral videos ever could. He had not changed the world. He had not set out to. He had simply refused to move when injustice expected compliance. And in doing so, he had given others permission to do the same. The cabin lights dimmed. Conversations softened. People settled into sleep or thought. Another flight. Another night. Another ordinary miracle of metal and human trust, carrying strangers across invisible lines. Nathan rested his head against the seat and let his eyes close. He felt no need to be first. No need to be seen. The aisle suited him just fine. It kept him grounded. And as the aircraft cut a clean path through the dark, the story found its natural ending. Not with applause, not with revenge, but with balance, with quiet accountability, with the reminder that humility costs nothing and arrogance costs everything. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with these 3 words. Know your worth.